The community-based strategy sub-criterion will emphasize how projects are designed around community-based priorities for self-sufficiency. Applications must describe their connection to their communities and how they intend to keep the communities updated on their projects. So the community-based strategy is worth a maximum of 10 points, and you can follow along in the training manual starting on page 73. The community-based strategy should describe the community or describe how the community was involved in the development of the project. It should describe and demonstrate a connection to the community to be served, and it should describe how you will keep the community involved in your project.
Okay, so basically here we're going to run through the elements. The first element under community-based strategy was describing community input. So here you're going to narratively describe how you got that input from your community. And remember that ANA lets you define your community, so it isn't like you have to get input from your entire tribe or everybody, all your residents and your reservation. But you can, some projects lend themselves to defined target communities or project beneficiaries and people that are associated with them. So you want to define your community, let ANA know what you mean by your community, and then you want to describe how you got their input into the development of your proposed project. Because the one thing you want to avoid is a project where, and somehow reviewers with a lot of experience can read between the lines and that they know when this happens, is if you grant writers are, I'm sorry to throw grant writers under the bus, but it's just an example, where grant writers are sitting in a room developing a project in a vacuum. They don't have any input from the community. They may develop the most beautifully written application in the world and may get funded, but what might happen is once they go to implement it, nobody's interested because they don't have ownership of the project. They feel like their input wasn't included. They feel like there are other priorities which they feel should have been funded first. You know, those types of things happen in communities. So ANA is trying to go around that, include community input from the very beginning and describe how that input was used in developing the project. So how are you going to do that? Usually it's with strategic planning, focus groups, surveys, those types of situations where you can gather input. Now, ANA requires that you add the documentation. So what you're going to do is if you used your strategic plan, and usually it has like an executive summary in the first page. That's the part you can, first couple of pages, and you can take that executive summary and attach it to your application and then refer to it in the narrative. We got community input using a strategic plan that was open to the entire community. It was facilitated by an experienced grant writer, and these are the groups that participated. You know, we had elders, we had cultural practitioners, we had education and teachers, we had youth components, we had, you want to describe who provided that input and really paint that picture to your reader of whose voice is being heard. And then you're going to attach the documentation. So that you can include executive summaries if those are applicable. Maybe you did a focus group and you had somebody write down the minutes and all of the proceeds that came from your focus group. You can provide a nice synopsis and include that in the appendix. If you had community meetings, you can include maybe like meeting minutes, or you can include sign-in sheets about who participated. And you don't have to include, specific names. You can redact them and mark them out, any identifying names and stuff like that. ANA and the reviewers just want to see that you reached out to your community and that their input was taken into consideration. Okay, so the next element is, it's element number 20 for SEDS and ERE, 22 for the native language. It is describe your organization's history or experience working with beneficiaries and or participants. So what you want to do here is describe how your organization has experience working with your target group, how long the experience, describe your successes with them. When I think of this element, I think of maybe like an urban native center, and they want to do a workforce development. Sorry, I always keep going back to that example, but it works so well. They want to do a workforce development project. So here, I would like to see how the organization, their history with working with this population, the people that are unemployed, whether, they're talking, what age range, where did they get the input, what other services do they provide to the same target area, how did they come to developing this project, and how well has working with them been for both parties, both the organization and the target population. So I would really like to see a nice story about how participants in this organization work well together for this section. The next one is an outreach. Community outreach is an awesome ideal because it keeps your community up to date on the progress of of your project. And when you keep the community up to date and you're utilizing social media and you're attending group function, like community functions, you're letting people know what you're doing with your project and everybody's seeing how great you're doing, you're really going to get support from the community. And what that does is the support from the community can influence your leaders, your tribal leaders, or your executive director, your board of directors for your organization. And what it does is, this is a really good project and they're really doing good things. So we're going to continue to support them even after the A&E funding is done. So that's, part of sustainability, right? So that's what a good outreach. Oh, and we get into this for the next slide too. So I'll just move on to that. A good outreach. You want to keep people, the community up to date on your progress, and you're gonna start growing the support of your project. A good outreach plan is very useful for recruiting your participants. So if you need to do your recruit project participants, we talked about this in the recruitment strategy. How are you going to do that? When are you going to put out those ads on Facebook or on your website? What is it going to say? How are you going to reach those people? And you really have to be very specific about your target, who you're trying to attract. Youth do well with social media. It's a fact, and you got to make sure you're using the right app for them. Facebook used to be the gold standard, but Facebook works best, I'd say, for like older generations now, like 30s and 40s and up. I know, like even my kids, I hardly ever see them on Facebook. And I was like, well, where's the pictures of my grandkids? They're like, oh, we're all on Snap. And it's like, so you got to go to Snapchat now, or you got to go to Instagram. You need to know, where your target audience is. That's my point I'm getting to. Conversely, when you're talking about working with elders, social media doesn't work so well. If you're lucky, you have elders that are pretty tech savvy and, they can do cell phones and, they're on social media, but a lot of times they aren't. They're very anti-social media, very anti-tech. So if that's your target group, make sure you have a strategy where you can reach them. I usually promote, meeting face-to-face with elders, getting rid of the technology, talking to people, doing interviews, that type of thing. However, we're in the midst of the pandemic. Those options aren't possible at this point. So what are we going to do? During this age where we have to reach people virtually, social media is great. Facebook is great. All those apps are awesome for reaching out to people. But I think our challenge is how are we going to connect with our elders. We're not supposed to really be interacting with them. We should be isolated from them because they're our most vulnerable and most precious population. So, we really need to be innovative. I noticed in my community, our elders facility, they have the workers there, they have tablets, and they let the elders FaceTime with their family. So, now's the time to utilize social media to our benefit, do what we have to do, and be innovative. We can still connect with our communities even during the pandemic. And lastly, there's transparency. If you're very open about what you're doing, if you're posting things, if you're letting everybody know what you're doing, you're being very transparent, and your community can see what you're doing. I think people are very suspicious of projects if they find out that people are getting money for a project, but they don't see the change in their community. That could rise to some, get some people's suspicions up. So the best policy is always to be transparent and be very open, and be very generous about your information, and talking to people and outreaching, even if that includes social media, or someday we'll get back to meeting people in person. Okay, so we suggest, if this is in the manual on page 79, we love charts. I don't know if you've noticed that. We just love charts to fill out, and so you can address these criterion. But here's a good matrix for an outreach plan, where your first column is you're outlining the message or the purpose. The next one, who's your target audience? What are you going to use? Are you using social media, newspapers, radio? Who's responsible for creating it? Who's responsible for disseminating it, and what time frame do you want it? So for instance, usually your first outreach event will be a notification of award. You want the community to know that you received an A&A award. So your message or your purpose will be notification of award. Your target audience will be everybody. You want the whole community to know that you've got this award. The next one will be, your chosen ways to reach out to people. You are the experts on your community, so you can use what works best for you. And then, filling out the rest. And then you have an outreach plan.
Thank you for watching this video. We hope this video has been helpful in understanding community-based strategy. If you have any questions about this video or the A&A application process, our contact information is on the screen. Good luck with your applications, and we look forward to reading them.